go a-wandering along the mountain track. And as I go, I love to sing my knapsack on my back. Marie,
Woods and Waters with your host, Bud Leavitt.
Remember a year ago we were talking about baseball cards. The market was high. And boy, I'll tell you, there was great interest. Everybody was picking them up. Bill Arata was our guest that night, and we talked about cards, and we got telephone calls from Montreal all the way to Upper Penobscot Bay, wherever it was. Bill, things have changed in a year.
They sure have.
The market has changed.
Market has dropped.
You kind of, and listen, I failed to introduce my friend here, John Henry Williams. So we're going to talk baseball cards tonight. What's happened to the market? You predicted this would happen, might happen.
Yeah, that's right. You'll learn in our business, particularly when I'm in the stock market, to say might instead of will. But the problem, it's coincided not only with the overproduction of baseball cards and baseball card companies, but at the same time, you've got a recession developing in the economy. And the worst possible events are happening, and unfortunately, they're happening simultaneously.
How much of a dip have cards taken?
So
Give
far,
us an example.
Well, I was just telling John Henry before the program began that I saw a Clemente rookie, for example, which is a nice looking card in very nice condition, and it books at $1,800. And at least that's what a dealer should ask for in perfect condition. And I'd be hard pressed to get a third of that right now.
Wow.
So
This has all happened in 12 months.
that's right.
Was there a flood on the market of buyers, more cards being manufactured, more collectors? What caused this?
First of all,
Aside from the general economy.
yeah, first of all, there are many factors. You've got many collectors coming into the market all the time. The new issue market, so to speak, okay? The cards that are issued every year by all these companies. I think there are like 6 major baseball card companies now, where when I grew up there was just one, Topps, and then Bowman, so there was really 2, I should say. But now there are 6. And then there are a lot of ancillary companies at the same time. Anyway, they're printing cards all the time, and not by the hundreds of thousands, but by the millions, okay? There are only so many collectors that can absorb all those cards at any one particular time. So you've got that part to deal with. You've got an increasing supply and a demand for cards that has to have some sort of a top to it. And I think this is what you're having. And that doesn't have anything to do with the recession. The recession just adds fuel to the fire, because you've had a lot of people who have made, I think, the mistake of thinking that baseball cards is like the stock market or the real estate market and making it a serious investment. And they've gone out and take thousands of dollars out of the bank, invested it in baseball cards in modern day sets, put them in the back of their garage thinking they're going to appreciate in value, and now they're going to find, I'm sad to say, that they're going to have to take those cards out of the safe, not safe deposit box, they wouldn't do that, but out of the garage and dump them on the market and find out that they haven't gone up, but rather they've gone down in value.
Why would a Clemente card, though, go down in value? If that's an older card and they're not producing any more of them.
That, John Henry, is a great argument, and it really shouldn't. The problem with that is the relativeness of the card, relative price of it. In other words, the argument there is that probably the fair market value, let's say, is probably closer to $600 than $1,800. It jumped too quickly. Okay. I mean, after all, $600 for a baseball card that was printed back in 1954 or 5 is not a bad appreciation for something that cost you a penny.
Like houses.
Okay? Like houses, right. Certainly the appreciation factor is much greater on that Clemente card, but the $1,800 figure is too high. And the only thing I can just give you is some sort of an analogy. I happen to fool around a little bit with stamp collecting. And back in 1970, that's why I think I saw a little of this coming. Back in 1970, I purchased a set of Zeppelin stamps, which are considered the elite in the airmail collections in this country. And the 3 stamps cost me $600. Okay? By 1980, 10 years later, they were worth $10,000. Pretty good appreciation. Then they dropped from 1980 to about 1983 or 4, from 10,000 down to about 1,800 to 2,000. And there it's about where they sit today. That's where the market is. So from 600, see, but you have to backtrack. From 600 to 1,800, that's pretty good, or 600 to 2,000 is not bad. But if you were unfortunate enough to get into the hype of the market at $10,000, and you know everyone gets in at the, well, unfortunate people get in at the top of the market, and they watched it drop.
Well, what caused such a drop, for example, in those three stamps? They're just as precious today in the eyes of the stamp collector.
But what happened is the same thing that I think is happening in the baseball card market. All of a sudden, the stamp market, which was the dominance of collectors for years and years and years, all of a sudden had investors coming into the scheme. Now, investors, by definition, have more money than collectors. Collector buys one set, sticks it in his album, and is happy with it. The investor comes in and he wants to buy 20 sets, or 50 sets, or 100 sets. So all of this demand all of a sudden keeps pushing the price of whether it's Clemente cards or Ted Williams cards, or whether it be these rare sets of Zeppelin stamps. Okay, and they pushed them way out of proportion to where they belonged. They're still scarce, but they're not as scarce. And the Clemente card is a very collectible card, but you wouldn't feel very good if you paid $1,800 for it and looked at the market and saw it only worth $600.
You think they'll go back up?
Eventually, but it'll be over a period of time. It'll probably be a long time before that hype comes back to the market again. It's no different from the stock market.
How about Jose Canseco? They must have made 1 million cards of him.
I don't think he's as good a bet. The Clemente card would be a better bet, provided you can buy it somewhere near the bottom of the market. Now, maybe 600 is not the bottom, because I don't think we've seen anywhere near the worst of this market yet. This is just the beginning of it. Wow. We've just begun to fight, so to speak, okay? And I think if you wait a little bit, you may see the Clemente card. I don't want to make predictions because I can't. How do you predict the vagaries of a market, whether it be stocks, bonds, real estate, or anything? I don't know how to do that. I don't think anyone does. I just know, or I feel in your gut and your instincts when something seems to be oversupplied and overpriced.
How about getting just off baseball cards just a little bit?
Sure.
Still we're in memorabilia.
Sure.
How about autographs?
Okay, that's a fun subject. Let's talk about autographs of your dad, for example.
Right.
Let's take an autographed baseball of Ted Williams. Yeah. This is a crazy thing right now, because at the moment, your dad, God bless him, is still alive. Yeah. Therefore, he has able to increase the supply of baseballs that are autographed every time he goes to a show, or every time he agrees to be a nice guy and sign a dozen baseballs for somebody. It increases the supply of baseball cards. Well, autographed baseballs. As long as the aura of Ted Williams exists and the supply of autographed baseballs is still relatively small, the price of those baseballs have started to climb. But eventually, that is, if your pa, hope he does, let's look at him as a commodity for a minute.
Absolutely.
Okay, lives another 10 or 15 years, and he continues to sign as many baseballs as he could, then the supply is going to increase all the time, as long as his hand doesn't fall off.
Right.
So consequently, there's going to be more and more baseballs out there, and eventually that market is going to get saturated too, and the baseballs will finally drop in value, whether it be Ted Williams or whatever. Now, if this were Jackie Robinson baseball, or a Babe Ruth baseball, or a Gehrig baseball, somebody who has unfortunately died, then the supply of their balls are obviously limited. But the Mickey Mantles and the Willie Mazes of the world, and the Aarons and those big name stars, or the Nolan Ryan, now that he's in a form right now, you can buy the Nolan Ryan ball for about $30. I think it's probably overpriced.
How about the increased supply of baseballs? How does that affect the supply of a Babe Ruth ball, or the price of a Babe Ruth ball?
The increased supply of...
Let's say you increase the supply of a Ted Williams, a Mickey Mantle, Joe DiMaggio baseballs out there.
Right.
They're great players.
Right.
You tend to think that the prices would stay similar comparatively to great players. I mean, I'm not saying, but like a Babe Ruth or a Lou Gehrig, their baseball price, since they're dead, they should be rising also at the same time.
It has. It has, okay? And I owned I think I mentioned it at the last show. I was lucky enough to go into New York City one time and into a stamp store of all places, and he had right there on his counter a Lou Gehrig baseball. I gobbled up my courage and paid $500 for this ball, and I thought I was absolutely insane. I came home, showed my wife. She thought I was insane too. Until 10 years later, I found out that the $500 ball was worth $5,000, okay? And that's about what the market is on that Lou Gehrig baseball today. However, having said that, and I won't part with my my ball because I'm a Gehrig fan, I think that ball will probably drop in value too, because it has gone up like the Zeppelin sets and like this Clemente rookie. It has gone up too fast, too quickly, and it'll have to come down to some sort of medium or some sort of happy market. Find its level, I guess that's the word I'm looking for, and it hasn't found its level yet. But there are fewer supply of Gehrig balls, is what you were driving at, than there are Ted Williams balls.
And because there's more Ted Williams balls and more Joe DiMaggio balls coming to play, and they're staying at the same price, even though it's expanding.
That's
in
not
numbers.
going to stay that way very long, is what I'm saying to you.
That should drive up the prices of the other ones that aren't going to expand.
It'll only drive up the price of the other ones, John Henry, because of interest overall from collectors. More and more people say, gee, wouldn't it be nice to own a Gehrig ball, or wouldn't it be nice to own a Ruth ball?
Oh.
The problem is that the price of those have gotten out of hand, and how many young 14-year-olds or 20-year-olds can afford to lay down $5,000 for a Gehrig ball? Very few.
Yeah.
Okay. How many 45-year-old, 50-year-old guys can afford to, or even want to do that? So these collectibles have priced themselves out of the market, and that's what happened to that Zeppelin set. I mean, $10,000 for 3 stamps. Okay.
Yeah.
So now they have come. The investors, for the most part, have left that stamp market, and now they're at $1,800, where a collector can say, "Well, I guess I don't own a set. I guess I'll pay $1,800 for one." And a collector who missed Clemente at $1,800 because he said it was too damn high, okay, gets down to $600 or $400 or $300, he'll finally say, boy, I better pony up and buy that. So the collector will buy it. The investor who bought it at $1,800 licks his wounds at $600 and goes away and says, I don't ever want to touch baseball cards again, like they say about stamps. And I think I really think there's a similarity here.
The Honus Wagner guys.
Yes.
What happened there?
Well, Honus Wagner was a player, a very famous shortstop, as we all know, for the Pirates back in the early 1900s. And he had his card. In those days, the only people that made cards, for the most part, were tobacco manufacturers, cigarette manufacturers. And today, you could look on the back of cards and see Hassan and Mecca and so forth. They were names of tobacco companies. Well, Honus Wagner was not a smoker. He did not believe in smoking. And when this tobacco company printed his picture on a baseball card and found out that they'd gotten away with it without his permission, he was furious. And he threatened to sue the company. They hauled back all the baseball cards that were already issued, but like any collectible market, a dozen or so got out, and those dozen are among the most scarcest baseball cards that exist today. And I mean, a good one, meaning in perfect shape or as close to perfect shape as you can get, goes for about $100,000. Interestingly enough, when there's only a dozen out there, that market will probably hold up better than that Clemente card or better than the Gehrig card and so forth, because the Clemente card, there's probably, I don't know, 500,000. I have no idea. I'm just purely speculating. The Gehrig ball, Ruth balls, I mean, they're fairly prevalent. They signed quite a bit of balls when they were in their heyday, but there's only a dozen or so Wagner cards. So there's always will be someone's ego who gets so big that he'll say, yeah, I'll pay $100,000 for that card because I don't have it. But you only need a dozen people to do that.
Mm-hmm. That brings up a point about the forgery or a fake Honus Wagner card. How much is there of that going around, even with autographs too?
The autographs are scary. I will not buy an autograph ball unless I have some sort of a feel from where the dealer got it from. I just don't want to touch it.
How about your Lou Gehrig ball?
The Lou Gehrig ball, that was a guess. I could not look you in the eye today, and it is for sure a Lou Gehrig ball. I think it's a Lou Gehrig ball. I've had it checked out. I've compared it to other signatures, but how do I really know?
Right.
I bought it from a reliable dealer, and that's part of what I try to do. That's what people have got to do out there. When you're buying autographs, be very, very careful of the possibility of counterfeits. And as far as the cards are being concerned, some of these counterfeit cards, you got to be real careful about those as well. But if you look carefully on the bottom, I believe in one of those Wagner cards that you're referring to, I think it said reproduction right on the bottom of the card in very tiny print. But supposedly one of those cards had half burned, and I think maybe the reproduction part of it might have burned.
Didn't your dad have a card out that he recalled?
Yeah, it was a wasn't it it was a 54 Bowman, wasn't it? There was I guess they were printing. You were telling me earlier it was a number 66.
That's right.
With who was the other?
Jimmy Pearsall.
Jimmy Pearsall.
He and Jimmy Pearsall shared the same number.
And they weren't allowed to use the card, but they had printed it anyway. And so there are very few of them out there now of it, and that's a very rare.
150 that's out there?
Something like that. I don't know. I couldn't tell you exact number, but it's few. It was anytime you get a mistake, it was just like the bat that had a little something written on the bottom of it. It's a mistake.
That's right.
They don't catch it. Everything goes up in value.
So what's the value of this card of your dad?
It's about $6,000.
Really?
Yeah.
Retail.
Yeah. I went to a show once, and a guy had a box about a foot by a foot, and he had maybe 8 or 9 cards in there, 9 or 10 cards, and it was worth over $60,000 just right there. Saying, if I grab this and run real fast, get out of here.
I don't want to pick on your past forecast, but your son started in business, in the baseball card business, a year ago.
3 years ago.
Was it 3 years ago? But when we did this television show, and you even charged the boy interest.
That's right.
How did he make out when the market flattened out?
Well, what does a parent do, Bud and John Henry, when you have a youngster who loves baseball? He was about 13, 14, 15 at the time, and 14, I guess, at the time, and he was spending his weekly allowance all on baseball cards and doing it almost recklessly, I thought. So I said to him one day, I said, Greg, how would you like to have all the money you could possibly need to buy baseball cards? Wow, geez, his eyes lit up like in a kid in a candy shop. He says, got to be a catch. I said, yeah, you're right, Dad. Greg, there is a catch. Your dad's going to unfold something to you. I'll lend you $500, and I'll charge you interest, just like the bank does, and I'll be the bank here. And with that $500, you can buy all the baseball cards you possibly want. And I was hoping that this might teach him a little bit about the markets, supply and demand, how interest rates work, and so forth. And every year I told him we'd do this for 5 years, and he'd have to pay me back $100 a year for 5 years. And at the end of the 5 years, the debt would be completely paid off. His interest would be paid on an annual basis on a declining balance, if it was 400, 300, 200, and so forth. And we'd see how it works. Well, the first lesson he learned right away that I was pleased to see is he didn't spend the full $500. At that $500, he spent about $200 to $300, and he always kept a couple of $100 in the till. Lesson number 1, don't spend all your money. Well, he didn't want to do that because he knew he had to pay me interest, and he wasn't sure where the interest money was going to come from, so he held a little bit back. Well, if that had been his own money, it would have been a different story. Now, he asked me first he said, what about collateral? He didn't even know what collateral was. I said, if I'm going to lend you $500, Greg, I want collateral. I had to explain what collateral was. He said, well, I don't have any collateral, Dad. I said, yes, you do. You got your baseball card collection. He said, you want me to give you that? I said, you sure? Sure I do. He said, gee, what would you do if I didn't pay off the loan? I said, I'd sell your collection. I said, that's what the bank would do. Geez, you're pretty tough. I said, well, if we're going to do this properly, Greg, and do it like a bank, then we got to do it properly. Well, he agreed that the lure of the $500 to spend it on baseball cards was greater than the lure of possibly losing his collection. So he gave me his collection, and I escrowed it in a separate closet in the house, took it away from him, and put it in my closet instead of his closet.
Oh, you did?
Oh, yes, I did. Oh, yes, we're going to do this properly. And the end of the story is we just closed out the company a week ago, last month, because I was concerned about this overall market and been telling him about it, and he agreed. I didn't tell him what to do. He decided to do this on his own. And he closed the company out, paid me back the $500, 2 years early, in effect, had paid me roughly $100 worth of interest over the 3 years that he'd had the loan out, and put an extra $200 in his pocket. So he made a nice profit when he was all $198. I think was the exact profit he made.
I think we.
And he got his collateral back.
I think we ought to send a tape of this to your father. He might he might get some ideas here. Don't you think that'd be a good idea?
Oh, terrific one. Huh? Terrific.
Well, Bill, what's the future? And I realize looking at the future,
yeah, the future
is not a simple
Baseball cards will be around for a long, long time. People think, they teased me last year, yeah, you don't like baseball cards anymore, you think the market's no good. I said, I didn't think the market was no good, I just said the market was too high. I said, baseball is a cult in this country, and it's going to be around, it's been around since early 1900s, card collecting that is, and I think it'll be around to the year 2000 and beyond. I hope it will be 2000, 2100, whatever. I just think that, like the stamp market, the baseball card market is going to get rid of its investors and hopefully go back to the collectors, which means the market will subside if it does anything like the stamp market that I was alluding to a little earlier, and then you'll have a healthier market. You won't have these big, gigantic jumps and cards getting way, way overpriced. And that has to do with whether it be the collectibles or whether it be the card market itself. So I think the future of the baseball card market is strong and healthy as long as it operates in a reasonable fashion. And you don't have investors coming in here and hyping it and getting it way out of proportion to where it should be.
Is that a danger to the market?
It's a danger to any market, sure. I mean, you think of a young collector who had his eye on a Nolan Ryan rookie. Let's talk about that, okay? Matter of fact, I had somebody ask me the other day, could you get me a Nolan Ryan rookie? It's for his young 10-year-old kid. And I said, he thought he could get one for $100. I said, what are you smoking? He said, well, I thought you could get one for $100. I said, how does $2,000 sound? I mean, you see, there's no way this father, unless he is smoking something, should take $2,000 out of his bank account and buy a Nolan Ryan rookie that was issued 25 years ago or whatever, 20 years ago. I mean, I love Nolan Ryan. I think what he's done is great. We're not talking about that. We're talking about merely the market, the price of Nolan Ryan's card, and that's just one of hundreds, okay, has gotten way out of hand. It's got to come back to more normal realities.
Why is a rookie card, I mean, this is probably a dumb question, why is a rookie card so valuable?
It's just because it's his first card, and people tend to, a lot of them, people tend to have ignored them in the old days. Okay, the Clemente cards and the first Mickey Mantle card, there were fewer of them around and so forth because people didn't pay any attention to them. It was all of a sudden after the third and fourth and fifth year when the guy started to make a name for himself. He said, "Why wouldn't it be fun to get that #1 card?" And of course, that #1 card was in less existence than it was. Sure. So the same thing today, except that people have ignored the obvious fact that there's millions of cards of the first rookie card today that's made as opposed to Joe Blow's card, okay? And they're made in the same quantity. They're not, Canseco rookie card wasn't made in any less quantity than his compatriot sitting on the bench who doesn't draw anywhere near the salary that he does, but people don't see that. So consequently, Canseco's card is way up here and the guy earning $100,000 is way down here.
Why is it New York Yankee cards or New York Yankee names appear to have the greatest appeal to the general public?
The cult, again.
The cult, again.
Sure. I mean, you know, you're talking, and you're also talking the market. I mean, that was New York City, still is New York City, where you had the New York Giants at the Polo Grounds, the Yankees at Yankee Stadium, and the good old Dodgers, my old buddies, back at Ebbets Field, okay? And it was the only city that had 3 teams. Mm-hmm. And plus, at that time, it still is the biggest city in the country. Therefore, you have more people, okay? And they worshiped their teams. And to be fair, they had pretty good teams. I mean, where can you imagine where you had 3 Hall of Fame center fielders playing at the exact same time against each other in the World Series and against each other in the National League with Snyder, Mays, and Mantle? I mean, it was unbelievable. Sure. So it built on itself. They produced good teams, they had good players, and they have a big market. And had to say nothing about just what happened with Gehrig and Ruth back 30 and 40 years earlier.
You being a Dodger fan, and we're getting down to closing minutes here, one would think that some of the old Dodger cards, back in the days of the Pee Wee Reeses and the rest of them, when they played at Ebbets Field, would be a treasure. You never hear them mentioned.
Oh, yes you do. Yes, you do.
Well,
Yeah. They're mentioned and they're treasured. I have, for example, a Sandy Koufax card, which I'm pretty tickled with, because if you look at his rookie year, you'll see that it shows 0, 0, 0, okay, across the board. And with all those zeros, that card is worth a pile of money today, when he couldn't even throw a strike. I mean, the man was as wild as the devil. But yet, that's his initial rookie card. Pee Wee's rookie card, of course, goes back into the early 40s. But whether it be Farillo or Preacher Rowe or Campy or Robinson, they're all very, very valuable. The Hall of Fame Dodgers, like the Hall of Fame of any team are more valuable than the non-Hall of Famers. In other words, Jackie Robinson's card is better than Carl Furillo's card, for example.
This is a loaded question, but I think you're going to jump me on it. Who had the best throwing arm for a right fielder that you ever saw in your life?
Carl Furillo.
Yeah.
You want me to say Dewey Evans?
No. But you never hear Carl Furillo's name.
Well,
I won't say never. He passed away within a couple of years, and years ago. And he used to hunt up here regularly, and he went to Milo with that crowd of people. What a great, great person he was.
Yeah. Pooge, wasn't his nickname?
That's
Pooge?
right.
You know, I happen to follow his name and very carefully because he was my favorite ball player.
Really?
When I was growing up in the city. Well, I'm Italian. He was Italian. I think there was a relationship there. He won the batting title one year, I remember, which was the only year he ever did win the batting title. He had that great arm. He was playing in the shadow of the great players and
That's
so forth. He did average, I think, pretty close to 300 of his lifetime, if not 299, pretty in that ballpark. And he was just a steady guy. And then when he was all done, he didn't have one of these fancy jobs. He was a builder of the New York World Trade Center. That's when he stood up there as a contractor with a hard hat.
Yeah.
There he was as an ex-Dodger, and there he was up there in the building the World Trade Center as a contractor. I mean, I thought that was kind of interesting, as opposed to some of the other players who've gotten jobs in coaching or in the big leagues, batting instructors or whatever. I mean, he got right out of baseball and had to get a job. No fancy pensions.
But we were in Milo, and we were at this deer camp, and he brought Hugh Casey with him. The great Hugh Casey. And, of course, Hugh kept coming to Milo for years and years, as well as Furillo. And but what a pair. Carl would just listen to Casey talk, and, you know, he would ramble on. And what a relief pitcher.
Oh, yeah, I would have loved to have seen him. I never saw Hugh Casey pitch.
What a relief pitcher.
You get two baseball players together, and they just talk and talk and talk. I was down at the show with Dad. It was Dad, Johnny Pesky, Bobby Dorr, Dom DiMaggio, and Eddie Pellegrini.
Whoa.
And they got together for dinner. And that's all they did. They just sat in the corner and just
swap
talked.
stories.
No, they just kept on talking.
Yeah, I can listen to them for hours.
Yeah.
You know, that's a myth. A lot of people think when ball players leave the ballpark and they get together and go out to dinner and so forth that they don't talk about the game. That's just not true.
That's exactly what they do talk about.
That's exactly what they do talk about. I shall never forget as long as I live. The old Somerset Hotel, Bobby Dorr and Ted Williams and I in one room after a night game. Bobby's having a hard time to hit. Ted Williams grabs a broom and he's swinging it, you know, wildly as an enthusiastic. Bobby, you weren't doing this. And this went on. I fell sound asleep in a chair, and this went on all night.
They got in an argument about hitting, Bobby Dorr and Dad.
Oh, boy.
Right down there.
Oh, yeah.
3 weeks ago. I mean, Dad, you know, he's giving them all the questions. Said, I can't believe you even hit in the major leagues, Dad said. What he thinks.
I love it.
Oh, yeah. I don't know how you ever get a base hit, he'd tell Bobby.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Bobby, in that quiet manner of his, you know, he knows Ted. Listen, Bill Arata, nice having you.
Thank you. It was fun.
Nice having you, John Henry. Good night, everyone. Hope you enjoyed.
Along the mountain track, and as I go, I love to sing my knapsack on my back.